This podcast on binomial products is another review type of podcast. It's material that a lot of people in class will already be thoroughly familiar with. And if you're already thoroughly familiar with this material, you do not really need to do this podcast. What we're going to be talking about is squaring a binomial, doing a product of conjugates, and then factoring product of conjugates. So if you're thoroughly familiar, very, very good at the FOIL, very good at factoring, you can ignore this podcast. But for those of you who feel a little weak about this, go ahead and go through this. It's very short, but very worthwhile. The first thing I wanted to do is talk to you about binomial products. Products means multiplying. A binomial is a two-term expression. So if you look at this first expression, 2x minus 3, terms are separated by plus or minus signs, so there's a minus separating that into two terms, which is why it's called a binomial, and this is a binomial. And we multiply these together by a technique called the FOIL, F-O plus I-L, F-O-I-L, FOIL. F stands for first. It means to get the first term of your answer, multiply the first term. So I'm going to take 4x and I'm going to multiply it by 2x, and that's going to give me 8x squared for the first term of my answer. The L of FOIL stands for last, and it says to get the last term of your answer, multiply the last terms of the binomials. So I'll take negative 3 times positive 1. That'll give me negative 3, and that's my last term of my answer. Now you need the all-important middle term, and that comes from the O plus I, outside plus inside. Now what does that mean? Well, I've got four terms lined up here, and the two outside terms are 2x and positive 1, and the two inside terms are 3 and 4x. So what I mean by outside plus inside is multiply the outside terms. 2x times 1 is 2x. Multiply the inside terms. Negative 3 times 4x is negative 12x. And then add 2x to negative 12x, and you end up with 8x squared plus 2x minus 12x minus 10x minus 3 for your final answer. That's first, multiply the first terms, 4x times 2x, 8x squared. Last, multiply the last terms, negative 3 times positive 1, negative 3. And outside plus inside, outside product is 2x, inside product negative 12x, add them up, negative 10x, and there's your answer. Now there are two very special FOIL products which are going to take on a particular importance in this semester, so you should become very good at these. They are squaring a binomial and product of conjugates. An example of squaring a binomial is the binomial 2x minus 3. Again, the minus separates that into two terms. That's why that's a binomial. And I'm squaring it, so I'm squaring a binomial. And when you square a number like 4 squared, you mean 4 times 4. You multiply it by itself. So if I'm going to square this bracket, I mean this bracket times this bracket. And if I go by the FOIL, the first term of my answer will come from multiplying the first terms, 2x times 2x, 4x squared. The last term of my answer will come from multiplying the last terms, negative 3 times negative 3, plus 9. Now here's an interesting thing about the center term every time you square a binomial. Notice the outside product, 2x times negative 3, negative 6x, is exactly the same as the inside product, negative 3 times 2x, again negative 6x. So to get our center term, we're going to go negative 6x plus negative 6x, which just doubles negative 6x, which means it's negative 12x. And we have squared the binomial. Now let's take a look at something that's almost exactly like that, just a slight difference. It's called a product of conjugates. Instead of 2x minus 3, 2x minus 3, it's 2x minus 3 times 2x plus 3. The two binomials are almost the same, but they differ only in their center terms. And when you have two binomials that way, they are called conjugates. In general, the conjugate of a plus b is a minus b. They're exactly the same, except for their center signs. And these two binomials are exactly the same, except for their center signs. Now, what happens when you FOIL it? Well, again, to get the first term, you square the first, or you do 2x times 2x. To get the last term, you multiply the last. This time you get positive 3 times negative 3. And now what about your center terms? Well, they're almost the same. 3 times 2x again is 6x. 2x times 3 is 6x, but this is 2x times negative 3. So what we get is for the inside product positive 6x, for the outside product negative 6x, and when we add them together we get 0. So we don't get a center term, all we have is 4x squared minus 9. And that points out the big difference between product of conjugates and squaring a binomial. When you square a binomial, you will always get a center term, and you can find it by doing the first term times the last term, negative 6, and doubling it, negative 12. You always get a center term. Always center term. When you do a product of conjugates, you never get a center term because the outside product and the inside product both have the same value but opposite signs. So when you add them up, you always get 0. Therefore, there is never a center term. Always a center term for squaring a binomial, never a center term for product of conjugates. So when you see something like this, which is a difference of two squares, and by the way, that's a special name we give it, we call such a product a difference of squares. Because 4x squared is the square of 2x, and 9 is the square of 3. Anytime you see a difference of squares, that will always factor into a product of conjugates. Now below here I give you some binomials to square just to practice and some conjugates to multiply just to practice. Just go on through those. And then below your product of conjugates I have some factoring problems there. I want to do the first one for you. As I go to factor this, I notice it's not really a difference of squares. X squared is a square, but 2 isn't. So 2x squared is not a square. 50 is not a square. So this doesn't appear to be a difference of squares. However, notice that both of the terms have the factor 2. The first one is 2 times x squared. The second one is 2 times 25. So I can factor out that 2 and get 2 times x squared minus 25, and x squared minus 25 is a difference of squares, so I end up with 2 times x plus 5 times x minus 5. Now here are 3 more difference of squares for you to try. 3 multiply conjugates, 4 square the binomials. I have in my office a drill sheet. If after doing the exercises you feel that you still need some more practice, see me to get the drill sheet. And that concludes this podcast.